is a relaxed, informal mentoring program that we do every Monday at noon Pacific time. This recording will be available online for at least a few days, and all recordings are archived in our members area. I forgot to celebrate last week when we celebrated our 1-year anniversary. This is office hours number 47, so we haven't quite done one every week, but we've only missed a few weeks over the course of the last year. So we've been doing it 1 year. I think our first one was on September the 1st, 2013, and that one was on the most important success principle of all, taking 100% responsibility for everything that happens at your business. And we followed that up with 45 other office hours presentations. So that's a big deal to have been doing this 1 year, and I'll probably continue it for the foreseeable future. The reasons that we do this is because I know that being a successful business owner can be a great experience, but I also know that it's tough, that you really need to get the education and the training and the tools and the team around you in order to be successful. I also want you to get to know me, because when you know me, you'll know that I really do care about you, that I really want you to succeed, and I'm not like a lot of other business consultants out there that seem to be just after your money. Our agenda in the office hours presentations is that we have an in-depth discussion of a business success principle. I offer some closing remarks, some special offers, an invitation for next week's session, and then we go to open questions and answers. First of all, questions about and comments about the subject matter of the day, and then we open it up to anything else. While we're on the call and thereafter, I invite you to join us with the Facebook Brilliant Business Group. That's facebook.com/groups/Brilliant Business, where you can make comments and ask questions, share insights with each other, and support each other, and give takeaways from today's calls. And I also invite you to like our business page on Facebook. We crossed over 400 likes this past week, which is a big milestone. We're on our way to 500 likes. When you like the business page, then you get a little more, you get the energy of the day messages and a little more information, and share the posts rather, that I do when I'm in Facebook as my business identity on Facebook. Today's topic is on the Management 2.0, the future of management. It's based on a book that I read called The Future of Management by Gary Hamel and Bill Green. Gary Hamel is an economist out of London School of Business, I believe, or School of Economics. And he wrote this book in 2007. I've heard about it a few times, but I finally had one of my clients suggest to me that I should really read this book. And I really appreciate the suggestion. That's how I continue to improve in my capability of being a great business consultant, is that I'm constantly reading and understanding and gaining ideas so that I can share them with my clients and share them with you. As always, I relate the subject matter of the day to one or more of the key performance areas that I defined in my book, The Foundation Factor, in 2004. And this one is really all about leadership. It's about designing your business so that you are harnessing all of the creativity and all of the talents of the people that work with you and for you. Our agenda today, we're going to talk about hierarchical management systems, which are the traditional management systems that we see in small and large businesses alike. We'll talk about challenges with those current management systems, give you some examples about how companies out there are innovating the way that they interact with their teams. And we're going to talk about the role of technology and what that plays, and then, as usual, we will sum it up with the bottom line. First, let's talk about hierarchical management systems. You can see the org chart, I think, at the bottom of your page. This is a very traditional org chart. One person at the top, typically with maybe one or two helpers, an executive assistant that are off by them, and then organizing the business in ways of hierarchies, having vice presidents report up to them, and then people report to the vice president, and some layers at these organizations. Some organizations go 7 or 8 layers deep, with each layer typically having a span of control of 8 to 10 people. This is loosely based on military systems and military cultures that we had, where you really had to have a commanding general and ordering about the armies and the captains and about. I think it really carried over when we got the Industrial Revolution in the 19th century, in the 1800s. They largely carried over the hierarchical systems that were necessary and worked really well in a military society over into the Industrial Revolution. So this was really before big business, but before we did the big business, excuse me, almost everyone was self-employed. All of the businesses were family-owned businesses, and the mentor-apprentice model was the standard way that we started businesses. So think back before big business, before like say 1850 or so, 1870 or so, we didn't really have very many hierarchical systems at all. About the only place that we had hierarchical systems was in the military, and then it was pretty loose because you had to have a lot of autonomy for individual generals and platoons and individual fighting units because there was so little communication. I mean, the only thing that we had was couriers that rode on horseback or messages that were given with homing pigeons to communicate. Because we had so poor communication, they really had to have a lot of autonomy within the individual units. And in 1890, the average company only had 4 employees, and very few companies had more than 200 folks. And then came the Industrial Revolution. And with the Industrial Revolution, we saw a lot of advantages with hierarchical systems. There was, first of all, the division of labor. The division of labor meant that you could have people just have one specific job. We invented the assembly lines so that people were just only doing one job day after day after day instead of doing all kinds of jobs. I think the early example of that was manufacturing rifles. In the early days of manufacturing rifles, you would have one master craftsman who did everything. They made all of the parts. They made the barrel, they made the stock, they put everything together, they assembled it, and they were the master craftsman for the entire making of the rifle itself. But when the Industrial Revolution came about, you would have specialists. You'd have people making the barrels, people making the stocks, people making the firing mechanisms, and people assembling it all into the end finished product. And the reason we did that is because it could be highly efficient. It really facilitated communication and coordination, especially before the internet. And as we mentioned earlier, in the very early days, when we didn't even have things like the U.S. mail, all the thing that you had was people riding on horseback, and then later on trains. You really kind of had to have a hierarchical system to facilitate communication between a much larger organization. It allowed you to have individual accountability for subtasks. In the mentor-apprentice model, you had individual accountability for what you were responsible of making, but not quite the same that was available with hierarchical systems. Then you could focus and specialize and really start measuring and talking about things like operational efficiency. But there were challenges associated with the hierarchical systems as well. First of all, they're very, very competitive. I know that many of you have worked in corporate environments where they were not only competitive, but very political. Because if there's 8 of us on a team, only one of us might get promoted to manager of that team when the current manager of that team leaves, is asked to go elsewhere, or is promoted themselves. So they can be very competitive and very political. In fact, some organizations out there pride themselves on the competitive nature of their teams and the political nature of their companies. It's those highly competitive and highly political people that they push up into the top ranks of the organization. So consequently, we see a bunch of PYA and CYA, which is a bunch of protect your ass and cover your ass emails and meetings going out. In fact, it's been estimated that as much as 60% of a manager's time is spent on making sure that they're posturing and positioning themselves correctly so that they can maintain their status with the company and be seen as a person who is capable of managing even greater responsibilities and is capable of being promoted at the company. As a consequence, it can be very, very stressful to people. I know I found my time in corporate America sometimes stressful, sometimes exciting and energizing, but many people, especially sensitive people, people who are more of a poet than they are of a warrior, can find it to be extremely stressful in that environment. Your collaboration is typically limited amongst the team itself that you're on. And even then, because of the competitive nature and because of the political nature, you're all the time looking out for yourself, and it's really difficult, I think, to develop a culture that rewards people for their individual contributions, because honestly, by rewarding somebody else, you're in essence saying that perhaps maybe they're more deserving of a raise, or they're deserving of a higher rating, or they're more deserving of a promotion than you are. So consequently, collaboration and celebration of another person's accomplishments are really challenged when it comes to a very competitive, very political, hierarchical system. And as a consequence, creativity is stifled as well. There's a real sense at organizations like this of, I am better than you, or I am trying to be better than you because I have a higher position in the corporation, because I get more kudos from the boss, because I'm given more plum assignments. It really facilitates an I am better than you, or I'm trying to be better than you, or I'll do everything to convince other people that I am better and more deserving of a higher rating, a bigger raise, a better promotion than you are, which I think is really a challenge. In fact, I have one of my clients, one of my friends, the person who recommended that I read this book on the future of management by Gary Hamel, who really thinks that hierarchical systems are, to be held responsible for a lot of challenges that we have throughout our society. And I think it's because of this I am better than you kind of attitude that oftentimes comes out of hierarchical systems. And as a consequence, we have lots of disengagement. There's a famous study that was done in 2005 by Towers Perrin, I believe, the study that said that only 14% or so of the people at a company are really engaged with the company and feel like, it's a home, that they really want to put all of their time and effort behind it. Another 60% or so are moderately engaged, but they can be strongly influenced by the people who are engaged, or by the 29% or so who are actively disengaged and who are actually sabotaging the results of the company. So we have lots of disengagement, and I think it's because of this competitive, political, I am better than you kind of atmosphere that exists at so many different companies. And as a result of that, you have that lots of disengagement. You have a lot of ideas that are lost. Many good people leave a company for career advancement when they start to see that they are not in a position for that next raise, that they are not in a position for that next promotion. And really great people, well, they leave and start a business for themselves where they can have control over their own destiny, where they can be their own boss, and where they can do their own thing and express their creativity. So I think that here in the United States, a lot of our reason why we have so many different small businesses is because people have the opportunity to get away from the hierarchical systems that we have in corporate America and get an opportunity to do their own thing and to be their own boss. And unfortunately, in corporate America, managers love hierarchies. So if you go into a corporation that's a hierarchical-based corporation and ask the managers what they can do about that, they're not going to give you a very good recommendation at all, because there's more pay at the top, there's more prestige at the top. They get to play the game. They're the ones that get to exercise the creativity and in essence have control over their own destiny a lot more, because they're in far more control of their destiny than they are when they're at first level management or just an individual contributor. And they've got very little motivation to distribute the power or the creative opportunity to the people that work for them. It takes a real enlightened manager in order to treat the people who work for them and with them as they really want to be treated. There's very little motivation for them to change the rules of the game, and frankly, many people don't believe that a better system is even possible. So whenever we talk to managers at large companies about the opportunity they have to change their management style, to change their organizational structure, to really gain greater benefits to the company itself, we find ourselves up against their own personal agendas, their own personal agenda for prestige, for the ability to be creative, for, to have more pay, and that really limits the ability we have to revolutionize the way that management is being practiced in large companies. But here I'm going to introduce a concept for you called the age of ideas. This is I think I'm the first person to actually express it in these terms. I can't remember having heard it anywhere else. So you on this call today, you're the first person to hear this concept of the age of ideas, and that's where we are right now today. We're in the age of ideas because you really do have to nurture a lot of great ideas in order to come up with winners. The odds are probably 100 to 1 or 1,000 to 1. And let me give you some examples to back that up. It's commonly known that if you have an idea for a consumer product, something that you want to bring to market and get on the shelves at Nordstrom's or Macy's or Walmart or Best Buy or Costco or somewhere else, that the odds of your consumer product idea actually making it to market and being a commercial success are about 100 to 1. They passed the Inventors Protection Act of 1999 to make people track statistics, and generally that's the statistics that we hear from companies whose entire business is in helping people commercialize consumer products. It's about 100 to 1. It's 1,000 to 1 when you come to Silicon Valley and talk about the number of great ideas that actually get funded. The ratio is about 1,000 to 1. So here we have brilliant people with very high IQs working their fannies off with great experience, and the odds of them having a winning idea, I think, are about 1,000 to 1. So the message to corporations then is that you need a lot of ideas. It's not just about the ideas of the people who are at the top of the corporation. It's the ideas of everybody throughout your organization and even in other places in society that you need to be paying attention to so that you can find the few good ideas that are really going to work for you. I know that we've been talking about the pace of change accelerating, I think, ever since I started in business. In the late 60s and the early 70s in business, we talked about the pace of change accelerating with the ability of technology to spread ideas, and so people could communicate a lot easier. When I was growing up, Pops, it was like a rotary dialed phone and a party line, and like getting a long-distance call was a really big deal. In today's society, it's about cell phones and instant messaging and texting and internet and webinars. The pace of change is really accelerating as technology increases the ability that we have to communicate with each other. And make no mistake about it, we're now competing with everybody in the world. It's not uncommon at all for us to do business in China, do business in India or the Philippines and have virtual administrative assistants out of Malaysia or the Philippines or Taiwan, to have computer programmers in Russia or in Germany working for us. We are competing with, and I think cooperating with and collaborating with, everyone in the entire world. And the requirement for us to come up with new ideas has never been greater. So the goal is for us to build an organization that are capable of continual and trauma-free renewal. And the way that we do that is by harvesting the ideas of everybody at our company. And in order to do that, we really do need to redesign the systems, the ways by which we interact with each other. Because harnessing the ideas of everyone is critical to our current success and our future success. And focusing on the wisdom of the crowd, the ideas of the crowd, which is, coining the term here, crowdsourcing innovation, is really important to businesses. Because it's not just about streamlining the processes at an existing business. It's really about reinventing them, and that's what the book, The Future of Management, and what this presentation is all about. Fortunately, we have some examples to look towards. There are some companies out there who have already begun to reinvent the way in which they manage their teams. And we're going to take a look at 3 of them today. We're going to look at Whole Foods, Gore Industries, and Google. First, let's start with Whole Foods. I hope that many of you are familiar with Whole Foods. They're a highly profitable grocery store that was based on the concept of providing really high-quality products to people in a wholesome, organic environment. Well, they have also had a tremendous innovation in the way that they manage their grocery store. First of all, they've got local autonomy because they are so focused on really good foods, organic foods, that they allow a tremendous amount of local sourcing. So when you run a Whole Foods establishment, you and the Whole Foods managers in your near area, like within the 50 or 100 miles around you, really get an opportunity to make decisions about which foods you're going to place in the store, which products you're going to carry on the store, in the store, because it's all about what serves your local customer base and where you can get the freshest fruit and vegetables and the freshest ideas. They have visible metrics on their profit per labor hour, readily visible to 8 teams in every single store. And each one of these teams operates autonomously as a team as well. In fact, these teams get to vote on the new hires. So if you went to work for Whole Foods, if you or I raised up our hand and said, I want to work in the produce department, or I want to work in the pharmacy or the healthcare department at Whole Foods, then the team gets to vote on whether or not they're going to give us the opportunity to try out for their team. And then after 90 days or so, the team gets to vote on whether or not they want us to be a member of the team, because the team's pay is directly related on the metrics of the profit per labor hour. And they want to see us, they get to choose whether or not they see us as somebody that's going to be able to increase the profit per labor hour, or might be a drag on that profit per labor hour, and they get to vote on it. So it's not the manager of the team who gets to decide who's going to be on the team. It's the team itself who gets to decide who's going to be on the team, because there is compensation transparency. Everybody knows how much everybody is making. Everybody knows how much everybody's bonus is based upon the team's performance. And they really do have an open book strategy towards encouraging everybody to play the game so that the company itself makes the most profits, so that the teams themselves are rewarded with bonuses, etc. A couple of other very interesting things about Whole Foods. One of them is that each meeting ends with a round of appreciations. That becomes part of their company culture. But as the meeting comes to an end, the manager of the meeting or the facilitator of the meeting says, all right, let's just take a round and tell people how much we appreciate them. So it ends with a round of appreciation, an appreciation for those folks who are helping you increase your profit per labor hour so that it can increase your compensation and increase your enjoyment of your working environment. And here's something I found really nice, is that they have a declaration of interdependence. I really love that term. We are interdependent upon each other. We're not independent of each other, but rather we're interdependent. So our success depends on your contributions. My team's success, my company's success depends on the contributions of the people who work with the team and for the team, because we are part of a team. And this next one's the one that I really, really like. And that is because Whole Foods declares themselves as being a company that's focused on creating an organization that's based on love instead of fear. Wow, that's really quite interesting. Just that statement makes me wish that I'd had the opportunity to go to work for Whole Foods, because they're focused on creating an environment that really facilitates, the satisfaction and the camaraderie and the collaboration and the care and respect and the sensitivity for every individual that's on that team. I just can't imagine this happening at companies like Microsoft or Oracle or Apple even, because they just don't have that dedication to their core values of love instead of fear. It really does move me to think that there's a huge organization out there that's built on those sort of values and those sort of principles. The good news is, of course, for you and I, is that we can learn from the Whole Foods examples, and we can take the best of what they've employed at their organization and bring it into our organization too. And really good news is that Whole Foods isn't the only example out there. Another example that we're going to take a look at is Gore Industries. Gore Industries use what they call a lattice structure, or one where people just come together with miniature groups instead of a hierarchical structure. The team leaders at Gore Industries are chosen by the team itself. So if you show up in a leadership fashion with your particular team, you might find yourself being the CEO of, or rather the team leader. The latest CEO of Gore Industries is a lady, I've forgotten her name, and she said she was really surprised when she found out that the company wanted her to be the CEO, because she exhibited the leadership characteristics and the principles and the qualities that the team felt like was going to be most advantageous to them personally. So I really like that team leaders are chosen by the team based on the team's belief in their ability to facilitate the success of that team. So what we see is that we have no bosses at all at Gore Industries. We just have leaders. That those leaders of the teams are not there to boss anybody around or to tell anybody what to do. In fact, when you go to work for Gore Industries, you have a sponsor, not a boss, but a sponsor whose job is, or whose, I would say, who has made the commitment to helping you find your way into the organization and to be assimilated with and understand the culture of the organization so that you can find your way onto a team that sees you as a valued member of the team and will vote on whether or not you can be a valued member of the team. Each one of those teams is free to experiment with a large percentage of the funds and the times that they have, because Gore recognizes that it's really important to get the ideas of everyone at the team. In fact, that's one of the reasons Gore Industries was created in the first place, was because Mr. Gore was working for DuPont and came up with this idea that it became Gore-Tex and became this fantastic weatherproof insulative material, and he was not allowed to pursue that at DuPont Industries, so he broke away and formed his own companies and pursued it at Gore Industries, and he really believes in the power of the inventor, in the power of the engineer. So he really wanted to create an organization where people were free to experiment and free to collaborate with each other. One of the innovations that comes from Gore Industries is that people make commitments, and every commitment is a self-commitment, that we never give an assignment to somebody. So I'm never your boss. Nobody's ever your boss at Gore Industries, and we are invited to make commitments, and we're invited to tell people what we are willing to do and what we are committing to doing, but it's always self-chosen. The commitments are never assigned to you. Nobody ever gets an assignment at Gore Industries. People are invited to commit, people are invited to contribute, and people make those contributions and make those commitments voluntarily. And by the way, when people make those voluntary commitments, I think that they see through them a lot more, because everybody is really judged by your peers, and I don't mean to judge in a kindest sort of way, not judged harshly as in criticized, but as in evaluated. Your contributions are evaluated on your ability to make strong commitments and to meet those commitments. And every associate at Gore Industries is a shareholder in the company. I don't know whether that starts on day 1 or whether that starts on day 91. My counsel would be to let that start on day 91 after somebody has completed with a probationary period. But everybody at Gore Industries isn't a shareholder. They're always an associate. So you may find examples for your current company of ways in which Gore Industries has reinvented the way that people work together that you can use at your company. And if you find yourself with a very small company, then you've got an opportunity to reinvent the company from the very beginning, employing some of these techniques at your new company. The third example I want to talk about is Google. Google is famously known for having 20% time, and that means that everybody that works at Google is allowed to have 20% of their time to focus on a project of their choice. And Google gets thousands of ideas from highly intelligent people that way and allows them to place many, many small bets. As we talked about earlier, it can be a 100-to-1 ratio or even a 1,000-to-1 ratio as to whether or not an idea is really a good idea. So Google wants to harvest the really great ideas of everybody that works there, and so they give them 20% of their time. 20% of their time can be focused on a project of their choosing, and people can come together and choose to invest their 20% time together to work on projects. And a lot of the new ideas that come out of Google the new techniques that they have, the new features that they have for their systems come out of that. They're also very widely remembered for their 70-20-10 model, which says that 70% of all their time and energy is going to go on the core business, 20% of the time is going to go on things that are related, strongly related to the core business, and then 10% of the time can be focused on things that are totally unrelated to the core business. So not only is this 20% time encouraged to bring on ideas which are related to the business or focused on the core business, but hey, it's okay if you have an oddball idea, because you never know when that oddball idea will pay advantage in starting a new company completely through Google Ventures or through something that's totally unrelated that nobody ever foresaw. So another couple of things that set Google apart is they've got a very large purpose and vision. Their vision is to organize the world's information and make it universally accessible and usable. That's a really great vision. The inspiration for me at my company, and perhaps to you at your company, is to have a really great vision, a really big vision that inspires other people to connect with their passion, inspires people to work hard and say, yes, that's something worthwhile, something that I want to belong to, something I'm willing to jump behind and get engaged with. They also have a very simple core value at Google called do no evil. That's it. That's their value statement. Do no evil. In other words, treat other people the way that you would like to see them treated. Treat other people the way that they want to be treated. Do no evil to another person. If it doesn't feel right, then don't do it. Google also has enabled something which I find very curious, finding a very large span of control. We talked earlier when we talked about hierarchical systems. A typical span of control at a hierarchical company is 8 to 10. So you have one boss to 8 to 10 workers. Every once in a while we see a company with 20 people who report to a boss. At Google, they have as many as 50 to 100 people have what they call a hiring manager or an HR manager that's responsible. And that person frankly does not have the time in the day to be able to give everybody direction. The only thing that they have an opportunity to do is to focus on human resource kinds of issues, vacations and pay increases and evaluations and those sorts of things, because they have such a large span of control. And what this does is allow people to have a tremendous amount of autonomy within their team. So oftentimes your team leader, the person who's the product manager of your team, is not the same person who actually gives you any sort of performance evaluation or controls your raises or your promotions at all. That's based on a 360 peer environment system that they've involved. They also have this principle at Google called launch early, often, and fast. So whenever you have an idea, they really encourage you to launch that to the marketplace as quickly as you possibly can, as often as you possibly can, to find out whether or not that idea is really a good idea. They also, by the way, give Founders Awards, and the Founders Awards are not just, $100 or $1,000. Every once in a while, when somebody comes up with a really good idea, they give Founders Awards worth millions of dollars. That's right, millions of dollars bonuses when somebody comes up with a great idea and has really taken the initiative and to make it happen and to make it turn out to be a good thing for Google. And believe me, that's highly, highly motivating for people to work on their 20% project and make it something that really significantly moves the business forward, because they might find themselves the recipient of $1 million Founders Award, which I think that is really a great idea. The other thing that Google does is they acquire a lot of talent and ideas. So they are known to be a company, along with Facebook and other companies here in Silicon Valley that have billions of dollars. They're known as a company that will acquire those good ideas, because they do the math. If we've got 100 and if they have $1 billion payroll and they're spending essentially $200 million a year wanting to get really good ideas out of this $1 billion payroll, for them to spend $5 million or $10 million or a few million dollars on buying somebody else's good idea, getting engineers from that team and getting the intellectual property rights to those good ideas, makes really great financial sense for them to do that. So here in the Age of Ideas, there's several quotes that came from the book, The Future of Management by Gary Hamel, that I want to relate to you. First one is that if people don't appear creative at work, it's not because they lack imagination, it's because they lack opportunity. That ordinary people can be extraordinary innovators. And another great quote, as human beings, we are amazingly adaptable and creative, yet most people work for companies that are not. And in other words, we work for companies that aren't very human. So here in the age of the ideas, in the age of the internet, the goal is to work for a company that's a human company, that really cares about the individual, that honors the individual and respects the individual, and honors the contributions and the ideas that come from the individuals. And we need to look no further than the age of the internet to see what some really good ideas are about how we can employ this with our own company. In the age of the internet, we know that the internet facilitates communications, that for people to communicate on the internet doesn't require formal channels, that transparency is easy, in fact hiding is not, that privacy is really tough to maintain on the internet, and there are open source models out there for the way that we communicate globally. Open source systems where programmers from all over the world will come together to design and implement something, and open source platforms like Wikipedia give us an example about how we as a human species can coordinate with each other and collaborate with each other. The internet, there's some great quotes in the book about that the power of the internet lies in its capacity to facilitate coordination without the stultifying effects of hierarchy and bureaucracy. It evolved, the case is to be made in this book that the internet evolved tremendously precisely because it was not a hierarchy, because it really got the ideas of everybody. They related a famous quote by David Weinberger that says, "Our biggest joint undertaking as a species is working out splendidly, but only because we forgot to apply the theory that has guided us ever since the pyramids was built." In other words, we forgot to have a hierarchical system. We created a system that was without boundaries and without laws and without, well, primarily without boundaries. There are some laws associated with the internet, but we created one that harvested and harnessed the ideas of brilliant people throughout the world. So the internet was successful because everyone has a voice, because the tools of creativity are widely distributed, because it's cheap and easy to experiment, because credibility counts a lot more than credentials and titles, and because authority is freely granted and very fluid based upon somebody's ability to add value, and the commitment is voluntary and the power is granted from below. Wow, doesn't that sound a lot like Gore Industries? Doesn't that sound a lot like Whole Foods? And doesn't that sound a lot like Google? But wait, there's more. The internet is successful because the only hierarchies are natural hierarchies, that the communities are self-defining, that individuals are richly empowered, and that just about everything is decentralized. The resources on the internet are free to follow whatever opportunities that they see, that all of the ideas in the internet of today are competing on an equal footing, and it's very easy for buyers and sellers to find each other because all of the decisions that are made on the individual basis and on a peer-based environment. So here's the bottom line. Management 2.0, the management of the future, is going to look a lot like the internet of the future. When you take a look at those things that made the internet great, everyone has a voice. We can all talk to each other, that we are free to make our own commitments, that we're free to collaborate with. That's the type of organization that Gore Industries, Whole Food, and Google are creating, and the type of organization that I would encourage you to make as well, because people want to be valued and appreciated. They want to be creative. They want to have some pride of authorship. They want to be heard, and they want to collaborate with each other, and they want to work with a company that's ahead of the curve, that celebrates creativity and passion. That's been our presentation for today. We talked about hierarchical management systems. We talked about challenges of current management systems. We talked about examples of companies employing those new systems and the role of technology, specifically the role of the internet, in inspiring people to create those companies and making those companies possible. and the bottom line itself. So your homework and exercise is to buy the book, The Future of Management by Gary Hamel, and to read it and focus on becoming a modern manager. And get coaching and support from companies like ours if you want to implement some of those ideas in your business. We're going to have open questions and answers here in a little bit, and because of the delay that we had, we're going to carry this on beyond the top of the hour for a few minutes. We're going to have comments and questions on the topic of the day and any other issues that you have, and tell me what your biggest takeaways are from the insights gained on this presentation. Tell me what you're going to focus on in the Brilliant Business group, if you can, in Facebook. I want you to know that, again, as I often say, that I'm not a typical business consultant, that my distinctions are that I don't want a lot of your money. I just want you to spend an appropriate amount of money on the support that you need. I don't want you to jump into the deep end before you learn how to swim, and I don't believe that belief and persistence alone will guarantee your success. In fact, I know that organized effort, organized massive action is what you really need in order to be successful in your businesses. And that's why we offer education, training, consulting, and coaching services, and brand new services that we introduced just in the last few weeks on growth management services that really help you take the action that you can, help you create the plans that you need, help you create the education, get the education that you need to be successful in your business and be your partner in success. So I encourage you to sign up for our new Business Growth Acceleration Kit, or you can get my new program called The 5 Choices of Winning CEOs, an article that we have on the 10 things that you have to know before you start to raise capital, some samples of the inspirational works that we have, a free coaching session, a business clarity session with either Stephanie or myself, and some surprise bonuses as well. I really think the value of that can be enormous to you, and I encourage you to go to paulhoyt.com/CEO bonus. That's paulhoyt.com/CEO bonus in order to sign up for that program. Even if you've known a lot about me, even if you've been on these office hour presentations for the entire year, you're going to get some new ideas in those programs. I also encourage you to purchase my CEO training program. That is called Beyond Business Survival. As I mentioned earlier in the broadcast, that Beyond Business Survival is being authorized for continuing education units. So if you know professionals or you are a professional that needs to get continuing education units for your particular certification, then you'll be able to get it. Just give me a call and let me know how you want to do that. The next office hours session will be on next Monday, September the 22nd. I'm going to talk about project management. You can go to paulsurvey.com and let me know what topics that you would like for me to address, and I strongly encourage you to do your homework in between now and the time we meet again next Monday. So now I'm going to open it up to questions and answers. First, comments and questions on the subject of today, and then any takeaways and insights that you might have. Again, you can contact me directly with the information that's on your screen. If you'd like to schedule a 15-minute conversation with me, you can go to schedulepaul.com, and if you want to schedule a longer growth session, you can go to schedulegrowth.com, and that'll get you into Stephanie's calendar for today. So with that, I'll take a breath and say, Stephanie, do we have any questions for today?
Yeah, we do have a couple. One of the things you said in the presentation was, can't remember what company, there's no bosses but plenty of leaders. So how would you ensure that the work gets done in environments like that?
Well, there are several different methodologies to make sure that the work gets done. So when somebody takes on a commitment, let's say a large commitment, I'm going to take on commitment for a particular product line or of the profitability of a particular location at the company, then they have taken on a commitment for the team itself, for the team that they work with. They've likely been promoted to the team leader, and it's the team leader then that has the commitment for the operation of the entire team. There are some systems out there that facilitate that making of the commitments, honoring the commitments, and holding people accountable to their commitments. The one that I have been studying most recently is called holacracy, H-O-L-A-C-A-R-C-Y. Holacracy is a system of communication by which people make their commitments and communicate their commitments and are held accountable to their commitments. So the bottom line is that you have to put a system in place. You have to have the meetings. You have to ask people how they were doing. And what I really like, by the way, about Gore Industries, where they have lots of bosses and no leaders, it really facilitates the competition, the conversation about people holding themselves accountable. You know, self-commitments means self-accountability too. So typically the question is, you ask somebody, how do you rate yourself? How do you feel like you're doing when it comes to meeting and honoring the commitments that you made? And people honor themselves and may even suggest to themselves that suggest to their team that they be repositioned, suggest to their team what their compensation change might be, suggest to their team how they might be acknowledged and rewarded for their compensation or for their contributions to the team. So that's how I see it unfolding at companies. There are systems like holacracy that you can study, and you can really just work with your team to ask them the all-important questions. What would you like to be held accountable for? How would you like to be held accountable for your contributions? What are you willing to commit to? And how would you like to be honored and acknowledged whenever you make your commitments? Those are always great questions that you can ask people on your team. And generally, my experience is that people will sign up and really own up to that a tremendous amount. So that's a fairly long answer to question number one. Would you have another question?
Yes, I also have a comment here from Darlene. She'd like to know what you think about this, and it goes in the same conversation here. She has a small team in her employ, and then she outsources the other activities to vendors. And the vendors are accountable to do a great job, deliver on time, and if they do not do the job right, they don't get paid. She finds it so much better than having a bunch of employees, and they do brainstorming calls once a month where the vendors meet with and they get they get a sense of team that way. She wants to know what you think about that.
I really like that, Darlene. In fact, I did an office hours presentation, the number 10 or 12 or something like that, on working with contractors, and that's one of the points that we make. Is it's easier to manage contractors than it is employees a lot of times, because contractors have very specific deliverables and very specifically determined compensation around those deliverables. And you typically make a down payment and you make progress payments, but you have holdbacks and other sorts of things that encourage the contractors to deliver in the way that they committed to delivering. And I think a lot of what we were talking about, Management 2.0, is taking some of those concepts and principles that work well with contractors and employing that within our own organization with employees. The difference being is that they volunteer. We ask them to make their own contract with us. We ask them to say, what is it that you can do, and how much do you think you should be compensated for that, and how much is the job worth? A tremendous amount. That's another one of the concept principles with holacracy, is deciding what the job is worth in the first place. So we take some of those great principles of self-determination, of self-commitment and self-accountability and pre-negotiated compensation that we see with contractors and apply that internal to our organization. Great comment, Darlene. Thank you so much. Next questions.
Okay. How would you start about enrolling your team, especially those who are not so interested in moving forward with the new management style? Seems like it would take a whole different set of skills to get that done. How would you prepare or train for that?
Implementing change at an organization is a very interesting thing. I read a book a long time ago, I think in 2000 or 2001, called, what was it, The Art of Change Management or Change Leadership, something like that. No, pardon me, I remember now. It's called Leading Change. The author was a guy named Kotter, K-O-T-T-E-R, and he talks about how change management, how leading change in your organization generally requires a very strong methodology and a discipline amongst that. And the very first thing that you do is inspire people who are going to be on the change management team or you're asking to participate in the change with why it's necessary and why it's important. So I think you would start out with any change in any organization with inspiring people to jump on the bandwagon by saying, hey, here's the change that I think is going to be really important to us. And with this concept of Management 2.0, we make it a collaborative effort. You say that, I think that we can work better together. I think that we can harness the ideas, the great ideas that everyone on our team has in a better fashion than we have before. And I want to work with you to help design the way that we are going to work together in the future. I want us to say maybe even vote or discuss whether we're going to implement holacracy at our company or one of the other disciplines at our company and how we are going to change it. And I think you can either do it on a wholesale basis where you're doing it all at once, or you can tiptoe in. We're going to find out a lot about how a very major corporation does that, because Zappos, Tony Hsieh's organization that was purchased by Amazon a couple of years ago, is in the process of implementing holacracy. It's been a year-long process that they're going to finish up in December of this year. So in future office hours presentations, we may be able to get the debrief on what they did and what worked well for them and what didn't work well for them when it came to implementing that kind of management culture revolution at your company. But generally speaking, the two most common tactics, I think, and principles of implementing change at any organization are, number one, is really focusing on the value of why we are doing this and why it's important and what can really, how this change can benefit not only the company but the individuals at the company. And number two is to get people involved in the decision-making process, because people are far more likely to support a decision when they have the opportunity to contribute to the process and at least collaborate a little bit on that. So I think those are the two fundamental principles at implementing any type of change at an organization. Next question, Stephanie.
There's one more. Are you ready for
I
just
am.
one more? Can you handle this? Okay.
I'll do it. I'll give my best.
How would a small to medium business start to implement this new change? Do you think that you can do this with a small business like that? And what would you think would be the first steps to get started? I think you kind of started on it with your last question, but
I did kind of. Well, and I think the good news is that I did that at my own company. I read this book and I said, wow, I love some of these things. I'm going to start on my very own company. So the first thing I did is say, hey, Stephanie and Marcel, I want to change the way that we do our weekly staff meetings. I want to first start out with talking about the vision of our company. I want to start out, the next thing we want to do is have a little affirmation or some sort of a mindset exercise. I want us to, take turns inspiring each other with some sort of little affirmation or poem or something, and that's the way we want to start the meetings. And we're going to talk about celebrations, personal celebrations as well. So, I just kind of chose to start that. And you can do the same thing at your company. The next thing is, now that these ladies have seen this presentation, and now that I've given them all kinds of good ideas, and now that I have inspired them and empowered them to raise up their hand and say, I want to participate in this. I want to help us create the company of the future, one where we all, love to work and we all are collaborative and all seen, as being members of the same team on the same level. Now I hope I've inspired them to come up with their own ideas about how we can make my company a better company, and I want to see you inspired to do the same thing. I hope this presentation has inspired you to take some of these ideas, the ideas pioneered at Whole Foods, Gore Industries, and Google, the ideas inspired by the communication discipline and the methodology called holacracy, which I didn't really mention in this presentation except in the discussions and answers. And inspired you to take some of the thing and take it back to your company so that you can gain the creative ideas and the innovation, and the intelligence of the people at your company, so they'll get to be engaged, so they'll begin to feel more a part of your company and feel very much like they are contributing to that success. So that's my wish for each and every one of you, that you gain these good ideas and that you put these ideas into action at your own company. And with that, I think that we will call it a day. Thank you for bearing with me while I experienced the blue screen of death and the pause in the presentation itself. and we hope we got the recording okay. If not, we may get to do this whole thing again in a future week. But until those days, until we meet again, hopefully next Monday, this is Paul Hoyt wishing you a most marvelous and prosperous day. Bye-bye.